So, mi gente, I know y'all are tuning in. Are waiting for Investing Latina to come in. She's gonna be hopping in really recently. She's gonna be talking about how do we save within the community, how we do that just naturally. So we're very excited to show that with you all, share that information that's really valuable to our it's us getting by, making sure that we have a good way of making it through this year, especially 2021, especially the start that we have right now. So Investing Latino should be jumping in just right now. She sent the request and Latina. A ver, let's see. Wait for the jump in real quick. A ver, dame un minuto. All right. What's up? ¿Cómo estás?
Hello,
It's nice
Happy
seeing
New
you.
Year. ¿Cómo estás?
Igualmente, feliz año nuevo. Pretty good, pretty good. How's it been for you? How's the new year been treating you so far?
So far, so good. I feel like it started to a crazy start.
Oh yeah.
Everything, yeah, there's kind of been a lot going on, and that's outside of everything that's happening politically. But it's
Yeah.
been, I'm grateful and I'm happy that family is safe. And honestly, that's all we can ask for at this point. So I'm grateful. How about you? How's the year going so far?
For me también estaba bien. I think this year started off really reflectively. For me, I think going on is going forward. I really want to it's indulge myself with a lot of knowledge, with a lot of palabra, from my elders, from books, from just the folks like you and other people out there that are really good resources for our community, right? And so yeah, that's what I'm is to participate in. That's my goal. And again, sharing that with people, right? And again, I don't know everything, right? But I would love to connect folks up to the resources, connect people within our community to, someone like you that's a resource and definitely a great person to, to come and, definitely connect with. So that's my goal. That's my vision for 2021. I was about to say 2020, well,
I
2021.
know, right?
And
I feel
yeah,
like that was day too. I'm still writing 2020 when I write it
exactly
down.
like that.
Yeah. And I'm so happy that we're doing this, first of all, because I was on your podcast a couple months ago and we had such an amazing conversation that was really rooted in our history. And I know that
Mm-hmm.
that's something that you are super in tune with, making sure that we're referencing our ancestors and making sure that we're holding on to that energy and bringing positivity into our worlds based on our community and what they've done for us in the past. So I just wanted to remind everyone that we do have that podcast episode. So check it out everywhere that you listen to podcasts. And I'm glad that we actually planned this a while ago, but of course the things that have happened in the last couple of days is never anything that we can plan for. But I do want to address them before we really
Mm-hmm.
kind of get started about talking about finances, because it does all kind of come together and it goes hand in hand. What's happening, in DC and in our country from a political standpoint affects us financially in many, many ways. And it's important to kind of keep that in mind and address that. It's crazy that, yesterday and the day before things got to the level to where they did in DC. And it's really saddening to see that, people in this country, white people in this country, were able to just storm into our
Mm-hmm.
government and be such a threat to people. People ended up dying, and many people got hurt because of this event. And when you think about it and compare it to things that we witnessed last year, where everybody, or not everybody, but people that were out here fighting for the rights of people of color and for the Black community. And it's just sad that that respect, it's always, the disrespect is just so clear, right, in these things that happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a tough pill to swallow, to be like, wow, is this really how how they're gonna deal with the situation, knowing how the situations prior to this in a different context, how they were handled. So I just wanted to really kind of acknowledge that and talk about that a little bit so that people can really kind of see it. Unfortunately, this is how America is,
Mm-hmm.
right? This is how it's set up. This is probably as American as it gets. And when we think about that, it can be a little disheartening. It could be a little depressing, but we do have to see things for what they really are, for the
Mm-hmm.
reality of the
Yeah.
situation and the fact that racism is still very much alive and discrimination happens every single day to people in our community and people outside of our community. We can also consider all people of not originally from here, or even people that are from here but are constantly discriminated just because of the color of their skin. These are things that actually happen, and they affect us not only from on a social level, but they also affect us on an economical level, right? So all of that being said, I hope that everybody is like doing their
Mm-hmm.
best to stay calm and have keep their mental health intact, because I know that these types of I know for me last year, everything that happened with the social unrest, it was very
Mm-hmm.
draining and it was very disheartening and it was tough. So I know that these moments when stuff like this happens, they're very tough. And I want you to tell people about your grandmother, and how she used to fight for the rights of her people and the community, because I know that that's a special story that I heard on your
Yeah.
podcast that I think everybody here would like can benefit from hearing just a tiny bit about it. And then we'll definitely get into all of the finance stuff that we want to talk about for this year.
Yeah, and I think just to add on just a little bit about that too, is that last year we definitely witnessed a lot of drastic differences, right? We've seen COVID hit us in different ways, and we saw that some community members got a stimulus check, and some of them did not, especially those immigrant families, right? And so even like this year, when we think about stimulus checks, that also takes into account. That also comes to be. I think California is different, in which I think we are going to be having the stimulus check, for on our undocumented families. But although yes, like we are unique to like the whole other 50 states, other 49 states. So again, there's a lot of things that still have to be worked out, in order to actually have equality for our communities, right? Because that's still like very very far reach. We still gotta luchar, for that goal. Even with the new president, right? It's the Biden is still gonna be, we still gotta maintain him accountable and make sure that we continue, fighting for the things we want to see within the community, within the whole country, as a whole. Pero
For sure.
just to answer your question about mi abuelita, the story that I have shared in my podcast, the first episode that I've aired, is the really was stemming from like my acknowledgement of like how profound her story is, how profound her activism has been, especially like early on when she was younger. She was active with the huelgas, active with Cesar Chavez. She has her bandera that's signed by Cesar Chavez too, and so there's a lot of history behind her as a individual. And for me, like when I was growing up, I think I would say I took it for granted, right? And I think I'm not gonna, yeah, I was gonna say like a lot of us, we actually like grow up and we take a lot of different things for granted. Our dichos, our cuentos, the stories of our elders, the stories of
Totally.
our primos or whoever, right? We just take it for granted. And I think for me, I went off to college thinking, oh, I want to learn more about my cultura, I want to learn more about my community. And I think I found more about my community, found out more by talking to my community members, talking to my abuelita, talking to my mom, my dad, to you, right? Other people within my community that resemble part of my story too. And so to me, like again, the purpose of like this episode is to ground people and show that, within this community, within our barrios, within our, again, I know you're in New York, right? But like, regardless of that, we still have a lot of to share with one another, right? That we could come to one another and ask each other questions and learn from each other like that too. And
Right.
so to me, it's really a blessing to have acknowledged that and come to realize that and have that intentionality within every episode that I do, especially with yours too. If y'all haven't checked out the episode I did with the Investing Latina, it's definitely profound too because she definitely shares a part of her that I'm really I really thank you for sharing that. Especially for us as our community to really um immerse ourselves within your story también.
Yeah.
And again, just for them to get a little refresher about like how you began yeah, like the beginning of like your family, right, as entrepreneurs también, like having the bodega right there at the Bronx
Sí.
too. I don't know if you want to share a little bit about that, a little background story también.
Yeah, and it was such a great episode. I love how deep we got into it. The space or platform to talk about it, and I just felt like when we sat down to talk about these things, it felt very authentic because of the person that I was speaking to. So thank you for
Mm.
providing that platform and that space. And I want to talk now, I think, a little bit about what we are trying to do going forward, even with all of the uncertainties of what goes on from day to
Mm.
day. We still have a lot of opportunity to kind of go from here, right? From
Mm-hmm.
here on out, what do we do? And I hope that everybody that's listening right now can kind of take some mental notes or some physical notes on how you can really take go to the place that you want to go, and but meet yourself where you are right now. That's always really important when we talk about personal finances, when we talk about money, how to manage what we have and how to figure out how to, get more and to grow from a financial perspective. So I think that we can kind of address some of those things. I do want to know where everybody's from. So throw up some flags, y'all. Tell us where you're from. I already see a Dominican flag. I think that's to us, Dominican and Mexican in the house. And tell us where you're from, and also any kind of specific questions that you might have regarding managing money, budgeting, investing. That's obviously my favorite topic, and always what gets me really excited to talk about how we can grow individually and also as a family. We'll touch on that as well. But I'll get started with really the intentionality behind how we spend our money. And I think that even with what has gone on and what we've seen in the past year, it's just more of an indication and more inspiration to see, yes, I see the flags, to recognize how important it is for us to support one another and support our own communities, because there are a lot of businesses, big businesses, right? Big box that we can kind of go to buy things. And of course, we all have so many different needs, right? And our needs can be very complex. But it's really also very important to kind of think about how can we help our own community, even if it's localized, right? And when you talk about community, you definitely talk about, in your hood, in your barrio, what's going on right in your backyard. Those are the things that really matter. And then it goes beyond that. Obviously, we're in the position where our audiences are global. They're listening from from many different countries, from all other places. But that's also community. And I think that when we come together on a Friday night like right now, automatically, where no matter where you are, we become a crew, right? And that's what matters. And I think that supporting your own community and also figuring out how you can best use your dollars to really expand your voice and to really kind of vocalize who it is that you support and what you support. And I think a lot of people do that in many different ways. And one of the ways is definitely, buying from the bodega, the local store, supporting those small businesses, buying, from the people that you know and people that you care about that have started small businesses. All those things are really important, and they make a big difference to those people when you compare it to the huge corporations that are out there, right? The Amazons of the world and the Walmarts of the world, which we're going to get to, of course. We can't deny it. We can't completely disregard it. But I think that's really important. And I want everybody to, going into 2021, the first thing that you really have to do is think about your intentions behind how you spend money and what you spend money on, right? Making sure that they're aligned. The way that you spend money is very much aligned with what you value and the way that you want to live your life this year, right? So it's kind of hard to think, oh my God, my whole life, what is it that I want to do? That's like, a huge undertaking to kind of figure out and sort through. But what you can sort through is, what am I going to do in the next coming months, right? In this year, what are the things that I'm going to focus on? And for a lot of people, especially at the beginning of the year, a lot of resolutions that we talk about and set, their financial resolutions, their health focused resolutions, career resolutions, right? How can we improve? How can we become better people, better individuals, and also be better community members? So intentionality is probably one of the biggest things for me, and one of my biggest tips when it comes to how to really set your intentions for the year. Something that's really important also when I talk about finances specifically is to know that you have to give things a try. Even when you don't understand them completely, even when you don't know exactly how to do something, it's really important that you put yourself out there in order to get started. And that, of course, is directly related to investing. So once you establish that first part where, okay, what are my intentions? What do I plan on spending money on so that it's aligned with my values? Then you push yourself to get closer to those values. And if there is something that you don't know, seek out knowledge, right? I love that you mentioned that that's what you're going to do this year. You're going to indulge in knowledge and community and learning. And that's super, super important, right? You want to be able to get to the place where you know enough to get started, and then you keep growing from there. And like I mentioned earlier, staying focused. This year, what can you do in the next 3 months, in the next 6 months? So investing always seems very overwhelming for a lot of people. It's like, oh, what do you invest in? And also, what's difficult about our system, our capitalistic system, is that it can be a little bit of a tug of war. Do I want to support these big organizations? Do I want to invest in the Amazons of the world, in the Walmarts of the world that are not necessarily, and oftentimes not very great about being socially responsible, right? With our communities, with the way that they pay, low labor costs that they have, and not really taking care of their labor force. So that's always a little bit of a struggle, and it's something that we have to kind of get through and find balance. So a lot of I recently, not that recent, I feel like the time has kind of come together, but a couple months ago I taught a class on how to invest anti-racistly, right? And really looking for and focusing on companies that give social responsibility and that take their own, they take responsibility with how they treat their people, and making sure that it's also a diverse people into account when they're creating their business and when they're building their business and as they evolve their business. And I think that that's something that we can do, and we can always try to find a balance on while we navigate this capitalistic system. So there are definitely ways to do that, and there's ways that we can kind of use the system for what it is and the benefit that we can get from it, which is the compounding interest that we get just by simply participating in the stock market, which many of our people don't do, right? And we'll get into that in a second, but participating into the system, and then also trying to find a balance by kind of focusing on companies that are going to be better companies that are being respectful to our communities. Are there questions in there?
Yeah,
Since I'm a
there's
little bit further
definitely.
than you are, you have to give me the questions, okay?
Está bien, yeah, yeah. So, most of them they're talking about like, they're about their A,
Yes.
and just like work related type of things, and I think little specific scenarios in which like again, I think that'll be like a good way for you to connect with them, and learn more about like for them to learn more about like the more of the personal finance and how to
Yeah.
manage that and everything. I think one thing I want to ask you real quick too is that I definitely see value in which within our own communities, right, that we definitely already learn how to like save, learn how to take the initial steps, right? And
Mhm.
for one example that I want to provide is that when we have let's say butter, little containers of butter, right? When we use up the butter, we save the containers for like for Tupperware or like for different things that we usually just normally do within our communities, right? So like whenever
Yeah.
we give food to our families, we usually take it in Tupperware or in the butter containers, right, and take it to the family, right, and just give it to them that kind of way, right? Another example is that whenever cuando lavamos, colgamos la ropa, it's something that,
Sí.
again, is like, not spending on like using a dryer or anything like that, right? And so there's things that our community naturally does, right, that saves them that money, that is like the easy initial step that we could continue focusing on. I remember seeing one of your YouTube videos, and I really liked it because you're talking about like cocinando, meal prepping, and like prepping some really
Yeah.
delicious food. But yeah, like that saves you the money from like going and spending it out, right? Eating out and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So I was wondering if you have any additional easy like intro tips for like people that want to begin to save up in order for them to
Yeah.
start investing, in order for them to start having like those emergency savings and so on.
Yeah. Perfect. I'll definitely address those. And I got a chance to kind of scope out all the questions that are being asked, and I'll definitely answer some of them. I want to take a second before I go into your question. If you can do me a favor and put in the Ask Me Money Things phone number, because we're not going to get to all these questions, but I want you, if I don't get to your question, I want you to definitely send it to me. So, Velas, if you could do me a favor, solamente escribe el número ahí and pin it down. which is, I'll read it to you,
Yeah,
917
yeah. It's 917
636
636.
4049, and you could pin it there. And I'm gonna try to get to all these questions, but just in case I don't, y'all can literally just send me the question and I will get back to you on it. So entonces, cuando se trata de comenzar, right, how we're getting started and what are some tips that you can kind of do to save money and to kind of figure out a budget for yourself. Yo creo que you really have to kind of start with
Okay.
what can I do to focus on creating that budget that I know that I can potentially really stick to for the entire month. ¿Verdad? So cuando se trata de how we actually spend, there are only a handful of categories that we need to spend on. And I use the survival number as a guide. That's like a sheet that I have where you basically break things up into 8 categories. 8 categories, that's all you really need. How can you use these 8 categories to figure out a place that's good for you in terms of what you spend on what? The first one is going to be your rent and utilities. So you bulk that all into one number for the month. ¿Verdad? Y se sabe exactly what you're going to need for that time. And then the second one is talking about what you need for groceries, and something that's really key to separate, because a lot of times people will just say, oh, food, I need X amount of dollars for food. Y es diferente. What's different about setting things or separating it from food and then also dining out is exactly that. And a lot of times our budget for the month can go towards dining out cuando no conviene, ¿verdad? And it's like, okay, I already spent $150 on food that I don't even have anything that I can use more of. So especialmente when you think about how can I be more intentional with how I'm spending money on something that I need, true basic survival. We need to feed ourselves. We need to nourish our bodies. We have to drink water, all of those things. So being mindful that you should separate the two, being intentional in how you spend and how much you spend on each, so that you can kind of keep yourself on a tap, like, okay, yeah, I've eaten out 3 times this month. I need to kind of pull it back a little bit and focus on making la comida en la casa, ¿verdad? Which is what I did a bunch of times on YouTube, where I shared my vlog. I have a vlog series where I answered a lot of frequently asked questions. You could definitely check it out regarding how to pay off debt, how to start investing, and also just basic money management. So you can definitely check that out. Pero, being very mindful, when I go back to those 8 categories, separating those two because they are different, and being honest with yourself. Sometimes we do want to order out. Sometimes we don't feel like cooking, and sometimes we need to have something different, and that's okay. It's just a matter of being clear about what that means for you, how often that will be for you. So yo creo que that's like one tip that's really important in terms of being able to kind of control and understand what our needs are as living humans, and being able to anticipate how much we're going to spend, because that way, when you anticipate how much you're going to spend, you can really kind of have a good idea of what you're going to have left over after all of the expenses are paid and after the month is done. So when you think back, and I'm going to circle back to those 8 categories, aside from groceries, dining out, we have healthcare needs, any insurance that we have to pay, and things that we need to spend in the house, like hygiene type of things. And then we have clothes, right? Clothes, we all need to wear clothes. It's not a multi-billion-dollar business for no reason. It's because for the most part, everybody goes out and they're dressed, right? Unless you live in New York and there's crazies all over the place that are running around naked. But we need these clothes, and it's also like it could be a pain point for a lot of people, because they'll overspend on clothes. And it's something that you can kind of control, and this is my biggest tip, is really by focusing on what kind of good quality things. Doesn't mean it has to be expensive. It just means that when you're shopping for something, it's of good quality. And then also trying to use it as much as you can. I think people get tired of things. That's just natural for us humans, and we're like, ugh, tired of seeing the same thing over and over. So make sure that you get something and you buy things that you are really obsessed with, that you won't get that mental fatigue of seeing over and over again, because it really just has to do with us. It doesn't have to do with how people necessarily perceive us. It's really how we're perceiving ourselves and how we choose to spend on how we dress and what we wear. So those are some of the things. And if you guys want to look at all the other 8 categories, you could definitely check them out on Next Advisor, where I write. So timemagazine.com/Next Advisor. And you can see you'll have a free downloadable sheet that you can use to kind of use as a guide. So I invite everybody that's on here to check it out if you would like.
Está bien, and also I'm going to turn this into a podcast episode. So in the podcast link, and if you're already, referring back to that, definitely write it down in the description también. So yeah, including the phone number that you told me to type in, I'll definitely include that as well. Yes, I know you wanted to answer some of the questions. I think a lot of them have to do with the Roth IRA and like how do you invest in your retirement portfolio. And so I don't know if you wanted to say some words about that real quick.
For sure.
Go ahead.
I want to address that because and before I go into Roth IRA, I'm going to go into 401k because somebody also did ask kind of the difference between the two and how you can use, or which one you should use first. And when it comes to investing, you always have to think about what are the ways that you can position yourself to kind of strategically build wealth. And that's going to look very different for everybody, depending on how much money you make, depending on what your responsibilities are, how much you need to spend in order to keep your family and your loved ones taken care of. And it's also going to depend on what your long-term goals are. So building wealth looks very different for everybody. Okay, but we do have a certain amount of structure in place where you can kind of use it as a reference point. And I want everybody to always think of accounts as reference points because all of these accounts, they have a limit, right? If you're using a tax advantage account, there is always going to be a limit on how much you can contribute to that type of account. So if it's a 401k, the limit to the 401k is $19,500, right? So a lot of times we hear the rhetoric of invest at least enough to get a match in your 401k. And although I think that is a decent way to approach it, I don't want to encourage that too much because I want people to always go beyond that. And I want people to push themselves to not just think about the minimum, because a lot of times we'll have a lot of people within our community, nosotros los Latinos, like a lot of times a lot of times won't participate. The statistics are that about 30% of the Latinos that have access to a 401k actually contribute to it. So just getting to that point is already a little bit of, a struggle in a sense. But when you are there, I don't want you to think about, okay, getting the match, what's the minimum? Because at the end of the day, that minimum won't take you very far in your retirement. So I always want you to, instead of thinking about the minimums, I want you to always think about the maximum. What is the most that I can put in this account and how can I kind of work my way towards that? Obviously, no one's going to start the first year and that they start working and contributing to a 401k, contribute $19,500, right? But you can work your way up, and you can put more towards that as the years go by. So taking advantage of those accounts, you have to kind of understand how they function and how they work. But again, you're not going to know everything at the beginning, and that's fine. Just make sure you're participating and that you're putting in as much as you can. Now, when it comes to the Roth IRA, so if you don't have access to a 401k, if, for example, you have lost your job like millions of Americans did in the past couple months, you can still open out an IRA. And as a reference point, money that is earned through unemployment is counted as earned income. So that is income that can be contributed to your retirement accounts, okay? Because you're still paying taxes on that money. So I want to also everybody to kind of keep that in mind. And so the options with the IRAs is really to function in the same way as the 401k, where it's a tax deferment. You're not paying taxes this current year, and you're going to pay them when you're just taking a distribution, taking the money out in retirement. That's option one. Option two is opening the Roth IRA, which is the opposite of that. You're choosing to pay the taxes this year, and not pay them in the future, which is really nice, you know, because you get to not only let that money compound, but you take your deductions later on in life without having to pay taxes on the initial contribution or the earnings on that contribution. So, you know, if you're in that position, you have to kind of think about, okay, how can I take advantage of these accounts? And the
Mm-hmm.
biggest, most asked question is, how do I decide which one to contribute to? And it really is going to be a personal question, because you have to kind of know what is your income strategy? How much money do you plan on making? Do you plan on sticking to the same job, or at least considering staying within the same income bracket for a very long time because you're in a job that you love and you want to stick to it? You don't have any interest in becoming an entrepreneur or starting any side hustles. If that's your situation, then just deferring taxes makes a lot of sense. You know, you have to consider all other things as well within your life nucleus, but that's kind of a guide that you can use as, again, a reference point. If you are an entrepreneur and you're like, I want to start businesses and I want to invest into real estate and I'm going to have multiple streams of income, then you could consider using a Roth IRA, because your tax liability now is lower than it will be in the future. So as you make money, you can, you know, as you make more money, your tax brackets go up and your tax responsibility is higher. So it's smarter in a sense to pay your taxes off now and not have to pay them later. So that's the big, you know, which one should I go to?
Yeah.
Which one should I do first? And what are the reasons on why you should choose which one over the other? Yes, the
Yeah.
19,500, it is for the year.
All right, that's good. Yeah, it's good to know. And I think también as you mentioned too, there's a lot of resources that we have available to us that sometimes we are unaware of, like a 401k or the Roth IRA or other things that are out there, right, that we have yet
Right.
to explore. And I
Yep.
think one other one that I want to know real quick, another thing that I think a lot of us don't focus too much on, or at least from I think what I see in my immediate family is that, you know, building credit. You know, sometimes that's something that we neglect. Sometimes we don't see it as useful, and in fact, we like to just pay cash. You know, teniendo dinero like en el billetero, we always feel like that's a very cool thing to do, right? You know, I guess I would say, right? And a lot of us do not open credit lines, do not want to ask for car loans, do not want to any way that, you know, we could build a credit. We kind of don't want to, because we were like
Right.
we don't either trust the banking or anything like that, and tenemos razón for that too, you know. And so a lot of us are again resort to cash and all that. But it's really important to build up credit, because the more credit lines you have available, with the longer history también, with healthy history, with the healthy history, it's definitely important, porque también whenever
Mhm.
opening up let's say a mortgage, loan también, lo que sea, you know, trying to get a house, trying to get a car, or even looking for an apartment, whatever the situation is, whatever it is that you're trying to ask money for, también that is definitely that credit score is definitely going to be something that's really important to
Necessary.
yeah. So I don't know if you want to add on a little bit about that, you know, about, you know, having good and healthy credit score or anything like that. I don't know if you know,
Yeah.
yeah. Go ahead.
I think that when it comes to the credit, building credit, it is a necessity. It's really important. It's, you know, it's important to build relationships with banks, and I know that's hard for a lot of people because the mistrust, right? And it's their fault that they've developed this mistrust, because they've taken advantage of so many people in our community by charging huge fees. Like, you know, if we bring up some of the biggest cases that have the biggest lawsuits that have occurred, has to do with how low income communities have been taken advantage of and
Mm,
charged extremely high fees,
mm,
and their accounts or their information and data has been used to open accounts without their consent. So that can be really definitely a challenge. But I want people to kind of keep in mind that it is the way that our system functions, and it's still important to have a healthy relationship with institutions that are going to allow you to take out loans in order for you to have buy a home or to buy an apartment, buy a condo, things that are, you know, going to better our lives and better our the way that we ultimately live. So it's important to do that. And some of the way, and I have tons of tips on how to improve your credit on the YouTube channel. So that's like the number one source. I don't talk about it as much now on my page specifically, because there is I speak a lot about how to get started with investing. I have a workshop that's called Index Funds and ETFs to really get people started in building that foundation. But still, you can reference some of those videos that I have to kind of get started. And even when your score is not that great, you have to kind of keep an overall view of your finances. Like that's not gonna make or break you. That's not the only thing that matters. It's important. You have to be smart and strategic on how you build credit. And ultimately, you're not building credit, you're building relationships with banks. And that's what you have to focus on. How can you build better relationships with banks? Not necessarily by taking out loans. That's not what matters. It's not necessary to have loans in order to build credit, but at least having a relationship that where credit can be extended to you.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's really
and
important.
yeah, and I think también you're right. When it comes down to your videos, a lot of that has to do with investing, right? And that's the premise of like your work y todo. And I think for those that want to like open up a brokerage account or feel inspired to begin to invest and build a Roth IRA or anything like that, what would be a good idea or tips when they're looking for a brokerage account or a place to invest the money?
For sure. You want to look at places that are not going to charge you fees to trade. So a great example of that is E-Trade. That's one that I personally use. I also love to talk about the TJ Maxx and the Marshalls of the investing world, which are Fidelity and Vanguard, because they have such low fees and they have established funds, actual investments. Because after you open the account, which is mostly what we cover today, you
Mm-hmm.
have to think about what are your investments going to actually be. And they make it very easy. So I would recommend those three. And I believe there's links in my bio to them. If not, you can definitely just look them up and dig a little bit further to make sure that you're not being charged fees, that it's low expense ratios wherever possible, and that you also have a lot of flexibility. Like if you think of stuff like some of the apps, you think of like Robinhood or any other kind of, or Webull, it limits you in terms of how much you can do. You don't have access to everything. So my recommendation is always to go to the place where you have the most access to things, so that you have more flexibility. So that's where I would focus my attention.
Yeah, and I think something else that I would suggest folks to do as well. One thing that I love doing is just checking out what's the best like for example, like for savings accounts, right? Which one has the best rates? Which one that provides you the
Yes,
more interest?
for
That
sure.
gives you the more interest throughout the year annually. Y también just doing your research. I always check out what's the best one this last year, what's the best one this month. Which credit cards too. If they are the best ones for going forward this year. Which ones give you a sign up bonus and all these different things that make each option really unique. So again, when it comes down to researching all these things, make sure you take some time to do it, because for one, it's really I consider it fun, because I think once you know it, you're like it opens doors, and for me, I like to share the
Yeah.
knowledge too. So it's always something that I like to dwell in, right? Pero también for all of y'all, yeah, do your research.
Yeah.
Talk to folks that know what they're doing too. Like, use Investing Latina as a resource también. And yeah, I don't know if there's any other things that you want to mention before we conclude this episode, or any other questions that you want to answer. For those that are tuning in, if you do have questions too, type them in. Investing Latina also offered us ask questions phone number, which I'll retype right now. Pero por ahora, if you all have any questions también, or if you want to add anything else, you could feel free to do so.
Yes, someone asked if there's a minimum, and the minimums are going to apply to, actually open the account. There is no minimum, and that's basically the same for all institutions. However, to get into a couple of investments, there are funds that have a requirement, that have a minimum of $1,000 or $3,000, but there's always ways around that. If an index fund, for example, has a minimum, you can always consider using the ETF version as your investment of choice for that. That will do basically the same thing, but won't have that minimum attached to it. So yeah, you can open the account, and I suggest that you open the account and start putting money in there. And then, you can of course take one of my workshops, which I have one coming up on January 18th. Monday after next. It's not officially announced yet, but that is happening, and you guys can just follow me or send me a DM and I can give you more details about it. But yeah, I think ultimately, like you said, you want to do research, but you also want to get started. You want to not waste time, because time in the field of finances is money. And people say that in general, but more so when you're investing. The best thing that you can do for your investments is to give it time to grow. And so I'll leave you all with that. Yes, I think Velas is definitely going to save this live, right?
Yeah, it'll be
We'll be
safe.
very intentional with saving it so that Instagram doesn't take it. But nonetheless, it's going to be a podcast episode, which I love. So
Correct.
make sure y'all check out Varrio Voices over wherever you listen to podcasts. Send me questions at my number. It's 917-636-4049. If I didn't get to your question, I feel like I might have answered all of them, but send me another question if you need to. The class begins at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So it's going to be 5 p.m. in Cali if you're on that side of the map. But I look forward to it, and this is going to be the 5th time I teach this class. It's an amazing class, and it's a place to build community, which I know, that's what you do, and that's what it's about, of like us helping each other out to kind of learn and just grow as individuals, and also do it from people that we trust and care about. I think that's probably the best thing that we can do. Find people that we trust. Finding, working with institutions that are looking out for our benefits and not just taking advantage of the people. That's key. So I hope that everybody can kind of take this tonight with, as a little reference point and as some inspiration to really get started if they haven't started. And if you have started, lean in more into your journey. Push yourself to do more, to learn a little bit more every single day, to, explore and make something for yourself that's unique for you, for your family, your loved ones, all of those things.
Simon, and I really appreciate having you on here también. And for those that tune in, or I really am proud of y'all too, for y'all to come and seek that knowledge and connect with us too. And for those that want to hear the episode or want to listen to it fully, make sure to tune in on Sunday, en el domingo en la mañana, on our Spotify, iTunes, or on YouTube también. It'll be all out there, and all the links that you're referring to will definitely be on there as well. So, stay tuned for that. And I don't know if you have any last words.
Love, peace. I hope you guys have an amazing 2021. Velas, I'm sure we're going to reconnect again at some point. I'm wishing you the best year, and I'm wishing you all the success, y que siga para adelante con todo el esfuerzo que tú haces para la comunidad. I love it and I support it, so let's do this.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Igualmente. And for y'all, have a good weekend. Cuídense.
Bye, everyone.